Matt Deitch asked the question. Shout out to Matt. Matt is an organizer that goes back to the March for Our Lives and has engaged in significant politicization and radicalization since then as well. And he said today there are many walkouts happening. I've organized so many walkouts, and years ago pivoted to calls for walkouts and teach-ins to be paired so that the action could become a momentum organization builder. I'm curious on additional insights that can develop this tactic further regarding student protests. Yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Fred, but it's a good question.
Well, I got one thought, um, but I guess it's kind of a long thought. um, I'll see if I can try to make it concise. And it gets back to that question of content, and in a classroom, let's say. Okay. Um, I began to believe because of my interest in jazz and interest in the music. And I always had this kind of idealistic notion that I wanted my classes to be like being in a band, you know, that I wanted them to operate that way. And I never was able to do it, never was able to pull it off. It's done, I don't know. But I began to consider that there's this other element to it too, which is that I kind of feel like every class that is about the class, that the class is a kind of, it's an event, it's this sort of organized, sort of temporally framed, you know, a bit, sort of occasion for gathering, right? And that the class is always about the class. The class is always about how do we get together to do this? What are the protocols? How do we organize ourselves in order to study this stuff, right? So it's always like a little experiment in social organization. Um, and and whatever the content of the class, it's always about the class. Whether it's this experiment in social organization is operative, whether you're teaching about opera or Palestine, it doesn't matter. Um, and and there might be ways to align the question of content with the question of form. Okay, but that question of form, or better yet, a kind of deformation, right? Right. Um, that's that's always operative. It's always has to be foregrounded, right? It can't just be hidden. It's got to always be made clear. Okay. And so another place. So every goddamn class should be an experiment in anti-colonial practice at the level of its organization. Okay. And if you're engaged in that experiment, then I always kind of felt like, we're the ones who kind of feel like thinking and studying is important for what we do and for who we are. So, so kind of not having the class always seemed to me to be like I'd rather like go on a hunger strike than not have class. You know, like I got more of a commitment to the experimental social organization of the class than to the integrity of my own body. You see what I'm trying to say? So
Yeah.
So I'm like, like in the H blocks, right? Like Bobby said, they went on hunger strike, but they didn't stop their Irish classes. You see what I'm saying? I mean, like, I kind of and this raises another issue, right? Regarding the question of what it means to walk out, what it means to go on strike. Okay, and I feel like over the last few years, maybe most emphatically, and again, if I mention a name, it's not to suggest that this person might be endorsing any of what I'm saying on any level, but I think one of the important contributions in Saidia Hartman's recent work is she's given us a way of refining, kind of in the wake of Du Bois and maybe in the wake of Walter Benjamin, our understanding of the general strike. And one way to think about it is, what's the relation between petit marronage and the general strike, right? Okay. What we like Du Bois in Black Reconstruction, he's saying, well, somewhere early on in the Civil War, enslaved people went on a general strike that basically tipped the scales in the favor of the Union. And it makes you want to go, well, did they begin the general strike at that moment? Or were there always these forms of labor action, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand all the various reasons why people want to not say that the slave was a worker, but just this once, I'll try to see if I can get away with it just because of what it might generate, right? Were there forms of labor insurgency, right, that we could talk about under the rubric of petit marronage, but that we might get even more out of it if we talk about it under the rubric of a general strike, right? It's a complicated thing, and it's something to talk about another time, maybe. But all I'm trying to suggest, in relation to that question, okay, is we should just always be trying to radicalize what it is we do in the classroom and embracing that as an experimental space, right? So that when a crisis emerges, when an intensification of the brutalities of genocide and coloniality, when those things emerge in ways that require that we pay attention to them, even though they extend a long ass history, that it better prepares us to respond in the attention that we pay, right? We should have already been working on this shit, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Because these motherfuckers are killing people in fucked up ways all over the place every day.
Yeah.
Okay. And we should be working against that shit every day. Okay. That's not to lessen or to reduce the intensity of the current brutality. It's in fact to better prepare us for the intensity of the next brutality, because the motherfuckers are working on that right now.